And mahalo everyone for being here today and sharing your Saturday with us. Remember that there are other C words like curiosity that fit into connection and critical thinking, or care, which might fit into compassion. But we are working with this particular constellation of seeds, these 7 seeds, that inform our efforts to build peace with ourselves, our personal peace, with others, interpersonal peace, and in community. And connection is kind of the overarching seed that can be said to inform all of these. So we hope you enjoyed exploring them in your action plans and in your own life, and we'll do more to deepen our understanding of and commitment to these qualities that we feel are so crucial. Just a reminder, we can't reside in one space. If we nourish compassion, we must also nourish the commitment that brings that compassion into action. If we are engaging in critical thinking and problem solving, well, that's not much use if we don't activate that solutionary capacity for our communities, right? So we have to work with all three in order to be effective peace builders. So now it's time to pair up again. And as our warm up today, we want to ask you to think about how have you been practicing being an upstander since workshop 1, using maybe a new tool that you've learned or acquired, either in this workshop or in your life in general. What do you find difficult about being an upstander? So again, how have you been practicing being an upstander? What is the tool that you've learned and are using? And what do you find difficult about being an upstander? It's good to acknowledge the challenge, even as we share new ideas and tools. So take a few minutes and pair up with someone new.
One more minute. One more minute. Yeah. Okay, get those final thoughts out and start making your way back to your seats, please. Yeah. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you. You folks mind making your way back to your seats? Okay, we're gonna ask one person who'd like to share. Is there anyone who'd like to share their thoughts on their conversation with their partner? Anyone? All right, you got it.
Well, I shared with my group that I didn't feel like I really did anything, and then Brad reminded me, no, going to work every day is doing something. I was like, "Yeah, that's right." And then I remembered yesterday I had an incident that happened at breakfast where another boy punched another boy. They were exchanging words about each other's mothers. And I said, I don't think your mom really cares about what a fifth grade boy has to say about her. And then I also said, we don't want to talk about moms because you never know what somebody's situation is like. And it turned out that the other boy is in foster care and it's not with his family, right? So when you say things like that, you really have to think about that perspective. And so we were able to successfully mediate. And I feel like me sharing a story where I had told a mama joke and the person said, my mom passed away, it kind of resonated with that sixth grade boy for him to realize, oh, okay, I can't just go around and talk about people's moms. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, moving on. This is just kind of an overview of our journey over the course of our 3-day workshop. Right now, we are at day 2. So today we're taking a deeper dive into our barriers and opportunities from the action plan. We're going to be focusing on some new Ceeds skills, critical thinking, conflict resolution, and collaboration. We're going to be kind of talking about this constellation of Ceeds, so putting it all together, introducing some specific tools and strategies, and we are going to continue the action planning process this afternoon.
Thank you, Scott. Next slide, please. So we always want to be data-driven, right? And we also want to understand what's happening in our communities, what's happening in our nation, what's happening globally. I'm going to share a series of slides on the challenges that humans are facing right now. But I'm sharing these in the context of humans are actually getting better, believe it or not. We hear a lot of bad news, but when you look at trends over a century, humans have gotten exceptionally better at working together peacefully, believe it or not. And I will show some of those metrics in a bit, but I'm going to first start with some of the challenges. So what are we seeing here locally? We know that we have unresolved Indigenous rights issues. We have reported cases of abuse and neglect. The good thing with that metric is it's actually going down. It's trending downward. It has over the last 10 years. So that's actually a good thing. 11% of Hawaii's high school students reported that they attempted suicide over the last 12 months. We know that mental health challenges are increasing for our young people for a whole variety of reasons. And then finally, only 87% of high school students report having an adult outside of school that they could talk to about things that were important to them. Sorry, I don't have my glasses. That's 67%. So we're missing, we're missing 30% of our kids. And so that's really important on our outreach. Okay, next slide, please. I'm going to let you guys read these and I'll just highlight a couple. So take a moment right now to digest some of these data points. Right, we have climate impacts. We have drug overdoses. We have enslaved people. We have mass shootings. Even though violent crime is actually going down, mass shootings are going up. I want to also note that violent crime is going down. And we have a very high, unnecessarily high incarceration rate in the United States. And the reason that we highlight these challenges is because there is no one sector that can solve these problems. This requires cross-sector collaboration. It requires funding from federal, state, county, and philanthropic partnerships to solve. It takes the everyday person to recognize that these are challenges that our communities are facing and understand what their role is in their communities as upstanders, no matter what role they play, right? And so this work in Seeds of Peace is focused on how do we raise peace-building leaders that can take a look at one of these data points and say, I have a solution for how we can collaborate to start to change these numbers, right? And then know how to pull people together, know how to work with different personalities, and to be able to create action plans to get us through these types of things. So this is why we do the work we do, is to tackle these types of protracted challenges. Final slide on challenges. We know that we're struggling a bit in this country around democracy and civic engagement and people's faith in government, whether their voice matters or not. We also know that we are dealing with a lot of discrimination and disinformation. And what an opportunity for all of us to bring this type of work, to bring this type of material, these topics into the work that we do with young people. It's never been more important. Next slide, please. And somehow Maya got all the positive slides. I got all the negative slides. That's okay. We're gonna talk about that afterwards. And then finally, I work in the space of early childhood. When I talk about adverse childhood experiences, I will always say prevention matters greatly. And starting young matters the most with our youngest KP. We know that abuse and neglect and mental illness, we know kids have incarcerated family members, there's domestic violence and substance use, divorce. All of these things are the undercurrents that our kids come into our spaces with, right? Not all, but a majority actually have at least one ACE factor. And what we can all be is that safe space, that safety net, that one adult that they need to help navigate through these adverse childhood experiences. And that's a really good thing. Next slide, please. I'm turning over to Maya for all the good news.
Thank you for allowing me to share the good news, Carrie. I have a lot of good news. Here is some of it. You know, we have strong gun laws. We have strong advocacy here. We're the first state to commit to 100% renewable energy. Our math and reading scores for our keiki have remained steady and above national averages in spite of the pandemic. And we created a state office of wellness and resilience, focusing on trauma-informed care and bringing together the individual, community, and AINA bodies. Next slide, please. So we recently had COP27. I don't know if you folks heard, but during this big climate conference, we had so many activists and advocates from small island nations, from the G77, who worked hard, grassroots, and ultimately put pressure on governments in the G7 to create a loss and damage fund for vulnerable countries. This means reparations. This means greatest justice. You look at places internationally where folks are struggling with human rights and oppression, and they are gaining real traction and getting the support of the international community. Places like Ukraine, places like Iran, where the protest movement has mobilized millions of young people and women, and men are supporting them for the first time. And we have more safe drinking water and better and fewer air pollution deaths than ever. And we have extraordinary women in positions of leadership and bringing a voice of real thoughtfulness and inclusion. Next slide, please. Carrie, back to you.
childhood experiences. And there's a lot that we can do, and we're doing a lot. And so I want to highlight some bright spots here that are happening locally. One is all of the work that you are doing with your young people to mitigate these impacts that some of our kids might have had in early childhood. The nice thing is brain development doesn't end until 25. I shouldn't say it doesn't end. It doesn't ever end. But we have until 25 where the brain infrastructure, really gets set. And so there's a real opportunity for healing. And you all are doing that actively. I also want to elevate some work that partners are doing to push forward an Aloha at Home campaign through Ali Alliance. We have Domestic Violence Action Center that has expanded their staff. They've secured a lot more funding to help women who are experiencing domestic violence, particularly those with young children. And then EPIC, I don't know if you all know EPIC Ohana. They're doing a lot of really interesting work around supporting women who are using substances while they're pregnant and keeping babies with them to help them heal together versus having the baby automatically removed and going to child welfare. So we're really looking at some innovative solutions. We're investing a lot more money into young children and prevention efforts. And so for me, we're moving in the right direction for addressing these adverse childhood experiences. Maya, back to you.
Thank you so much. And I hope that you folks are feeling optimistic and buoyant. This good stuff is an antidote to despair because we can do so much, right? So now it's time to think critically about how we model and apply peace building practices in our own organizations, communities, families. You're creating action plans that will hopefully make you feel empowered and sturdy and give you great creative ideas for utilizing those tools and strategies in multiple spaces and growing your ambition, right? And we can teach and model really productive nonviolent communication and conflict resolution strategies like negotiation and mediation in our interpersonal lives, in our families, for our children, and in our organizations, and then also hold space and facilitate opportunities for meaningful collaboration and sustained dialogue with one another, including youth. Don't forget to bring them in, right? Nothing for us without us. We talked about that last time. Bring young people in, make sure there's true intergenerational duet, and that the voices of young people are respected and honored because they need to feel that agency as well. So now we're going to watch a video, and part of what Carrie was saying earlier is that these solutions have to be multifaceted, which means they have to include corporations and organizations and our just economies, right? So here in Hawaii, we have done a lot for like food sovereignty and building circular economies. This is an example of a modeling that's been presented by Gillette. And we like that there are corporate sponsors for getting us to the place of mind shift. So let's watch this.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it? We can't hide. It's been going on far too long. Can't laugh it off. Making the same old excuses. But something finally changed. And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men. Come on. To say the right thing. To act the right way. Some already are. In ways big and small. some is not enough.
We treat each other.
Because the boys watch today.
I'm passing it back to you, Carrie.
Who would have ever imagined that Gillette would put out an advertisement about toxic masculinity? Right? We're seeing a lot of our corporations step in and step up when it comes to difficult issues and difficult topics, and using think of their viewer base and their purchasing base, and the influence that they can have. We never saw that when I was growing up. And it's just really refreshing to see that companies now have labels: socially responsible, SRA, socially responsible corporate, SRCs, socially responsible corporation ratings, so that those of us that are purchasing from different companies can know where does this company fall on social responsibility, and us as purchasers, can make sure we're purchasing from those organizations and companies that are doing this type of work, right? It's really important. So this gives me a lot of hope. Amaya, anything else to add before we move on?
No, but just that, sometimes we have to pay attention to messaging, and we receive so much unintentional messaging, not just from advertisements, but in society. We've talked in the past about how the toys that our children receive or the media that they consume has unintended messaging. So being intentional about that and being aware of that, I think, is really critical for authentic cultural shift, right? Thank you. Go ahead, Carrie.
To recognize the platform that they have and be values-driven leaders, that understand that they have a powerful platform. Those are the types of kids that we're trying to raise to become these types of leaders in corporations and companies, right? So you can see how those dots connect. The other part of this video that I think we all think is really powerful is the power of modeling. I know that the research that came out around how kids learn, do they learn more from what they're taught and they're told, or do they learn more from what they see demonstrated to them? And as a parent of 3 children, I was incredibly humbled to read that data that they're watching me. They're somewhat listening, but they're watching me. And that puts an onus on all of us to model the behaviors that we're wanting to see in our kids, and that's so hard. It's not easy, and it's an everyday intention. So that this modeling piece is really critical. So we're going to do a quick activity, and this is just a personal reflection. If you can take a couple of minutes, and I want you to think about identifying a negative behavior that you model that you want to work on changing.
Repeat that.
Yes. Please think about a negative behavior that you model that you want to work on changing. And don't worry, there's no share out. This is all personal. Okay, if you've jotted it down, that can be your goal for this next week, to try to change that modeling. And I know for me, one of them is when I'm listening to somebody at work and I don't agree with what they're saying, sometimes you can see it on my face. And so I'm trying to be much more mindful about how my nonverbal is showing up in meetings when I disagree with what's being said. So that's one action I'm going to try to take in the next week. Anybody want to share anything? You don't have to share any reflection. I want to just highlight what the woman in pink, I'm sorry, what is your name? Yes. What Rachel shared, that it starts with me. It starts with us, right? And having our kids understand that it starts with them, that peace within, and how we model is really important. Okay, the next video that we're going to show is what can we do around critical thinking? And I believe this is from Kailua High School. And it's a process that they use to facilitate critical thinking and to host spaces for difficult conversations. So please take a look.
I teach ethnic studies and philosophy at Kailua High School, and one of the approaches that I use to designing curriculum and to teaching this course is to be a culturally responsive teacher. I'm acknowledging that my students come from various different backgrounds, and I'm seeing that as a strength, and I want to craft a pedagogy that capitalizes on that strength in the help.
I felt uncomfortable assuming which ethnicity everyone else was, and uncomfortable with people making assumptions about me.
Do you feel uncomfortable when you walk around in the hall every day at school and make assumptions about people, or do you think that this was uncomfortable because maybe you were going to have to share it in this class?
I thought I was gonna have to share it, so I was getting kind of nervous.
When you actually become accountable for your assumptions, that's what makes you nervous. And we're using the tools of critical thinking so that they're working on their thinking skills while they're negotiating this academic discourse related to who am I, do I belong, how do I relate to other people. There's different levels of being local. And so I have a question then. If there's different levels of being local, do you think there's different levels of respect that local people give to other people? It gets them to look at assumptions and to start breaking down their prejudices. And these critical thinking tools can transfer across any discipline in any content area. And one of the critical parts of our discussions is that they have to be done in an intellectually safe environment so that students feel comfortable sharing what they really think about things and using specific examples from their life.
Second grade, I remember like we were living on the streets. It's something very personal, something very deep that I always had to hide from everybody because I didn't feel like I would be accepted. Like I can share it now because I feel like we came together as a family.
The teaching strategies I don't think are unique to me as a person. I think that these are things that teachers across the globe can be using in their classrooms. And I'm seeing that there's a direct relationship between the social emotional aspects of who we are and the cognitive development that we experience.
You could use what you learn about other people's opinions and what you learn about yourself from those people's opinions. And you can apply that in the future.
And I've learned that the only way that I'm going to get my students to be able to develop their critical thinking is that they need to be emotionally connected to the content that we're studying. And they need to do it in this community of inquiry where they're really interested in hearing what other people have to say about things.
I need to know, like, well, how does everyone feel about being local? People who are not local, how does that make them feel like to be left out?
One has all these students from diverse backgrounds. And I think that this is what brings joy and interest to my teaching and keeps it new and different. Okay, awesome job, you guys.
Maya, do you want to start?
There is so much that you can do with the method like P4C. I know that after utilizing it in my college classrooms for a while, I brought it home to my family, and we started doing the community ball when we had conflicts at home or around the dinner table, and it was fun. I think that we really need to nourish that capacity to get young people to ask questions and to feel comfortable in that curious probing of truth, of community, of self, that it's all about reflective practice as well. And we see that the more that they participate in that probing curiosity, the better they are able to engage in critical problem solving, but also connection and communication, and community building. They become voices that empower others and advocate for others. So definitely try that. There is a lot of information online for how you can create the community ball and how you can do the P4C process. And there's also Uehiro Academy that can at UH that can connect to your school and support you in that. Next slide, please. So these are our friends and partners, and we just wanted to share this learningforjustice.org website with you. They are the ones who helped me so much with structured academic controversy, which is one of our tools where you basically take one side and argue it, and then you do a flip, and you can creatively approach from the perspective of the other side through pulpit speech or journal entry or diary or poetry, whatever. And then you kind of braid the two sides, and it helps with flexibility. But they have a textbook on teaching hard history, which is about confronting some of the depths to which human beings can plunge, but always with a strength-based approach ultimately. So they have great articles, and they have a magazine that you can subscribe to, and incredible, tools. And the topics that they look at are race and ethnicity, religion, ability, class, immigration, gender and sexual identity, bullying and bias, rights and activism. So please utilize, the classroom resources you can see there that are available, and become part of the Learning for Justice community.
Or model for me, I call it the community of inquiry. And how do we create more time and space for inquiry with our young people? They want to talk about things. They want to talk about things that matter to them. They want to talk about their fears, their hopes, what's going on in their lives, but they want to be able to do that in a safe way. And I think one of the reasons that it doesn't happen as readily as we all hope is that people aren't comfortable knowing how to host those conversations. And so one thing I want to offer from Ceeds of Peace, is if those are models that you want to implement in the spaces that you are in, and you need some technical assistance around how to do that, know that we are also available to help. I can't think of anything more important than providing safe spaces for our young people to talk about things that matter. And that is how they're going to grow their critical thinking skills, their compassion for others, their courage. It's all of these skill sets that we talk about. That's where they're going to grow these skills. So please let us know if you need support around this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's watch this video on resolving conflict through restorative practices. We don't believe in suspension. We believe in integration. We believe in reconnection. We believe in building family from the ground up, with our young people and building community. If there is splintering, if those ACEs have made peace challenging. So we want to really although we're not able to eradicate suspension completely from our school systems, we would love for you folks to be advocates and activists for truly restorative practices. And here, of course, in Hawaii, we have a sort of natural with ho'oponopono when properly done, and led, but there are so many restorative practices that we can engage in our various spaces. So let's watch this video.
More than half of victims of violent crime don't even call the police. They prefer nothing to everything we offer. The vast majority of crime survivors' pain goes unhealed. What the existence of restorative justice means is that we can no longer pretend we don't know what else to do. As a country, we're really good at punishment. It's passive. It doesn't require people to act, think, certainly doesn't require them to change. When we lock people up, we excuse them from their responsibility to answer for what they've done. Restorative justice is a process to hold them accountable. It's a tool. People take turns answering questions like what happened, what needs arrived, whose responsibility is it to meet those needs, and how is that person going to do it? It requires someone to take responsibility, to repair things as much as possible, and to never commit that crime again. Isn't about feeling sorry, it's about doing sorry. Things like go to school, get a job, pay restitution, apologize, do community service. Restorative justice practices have been used to address low-level infractions like vandalism, up to addressing the impact of murders on the surviving family members. Restorative justice processes are first and foremost about meeting the needs of people who are hurt. Sometimes the person who can make the greatest contribution to a survivor's healing is the person who harmed them. To come through trauma, we need answers to our questions. To say, my life was never the same after you hurt me like that. Most survivors want the most safety possibly available. So if incarceration actually produced safety, we would have the safest country in human history. That's not what we have. The core drivers of violence are shame, isolation, inability, meet one's economic needs, and exposure to violence. And we bake those into prisons to try and keep people from committing further violence. Incarceration exposes people to exactly the things that increase the likelihood that they'll go on to harm others. People who are hurt deserve a process that will help them heal. People who are responsible for crime have an obligation to be accountable for that. All of us deserve responses to crime that actually make us safer. Our current criminal justice system doesn't deliver any of those, and restorative justice at its best delivers them all.
So we have demonstrated through substantial research that there is a school to prison pipeline, and that the practices of exclusion and punitive measures in schools, is part of the continuum that leads to punitive and non-rehabilitative systems of incarceration. So we need to think about how, here in Hawaii, we have too much incarceration for the most part, and it's unequal. Not just here, of course, but in many places. But we have to think about building our culture differently and ensuring that we are practicing restorative justice in myriad ways with young people, and also shifting our systemic approach to conflict and mistakes that people make. So here's a conflict resolution tool for restorative justice. It's a Venn diagram that allows us to kind of think about the various facets of restorative justice. Maybe you folks have experienced restorative justice in schools, with folks circling up, each person talking about when there has been an infraction, when there has been a conflict, you know, what that has done, how they have been impacted, what they would like to see. There is, of course, the hope for reconciliation. There is a hope for understanding. And there are restorative practices that are embedded into our into our schools already, but perhaps are being underutilized. And so we want to ask you to take a look at this. You know, here are the various dimensions, you know, compensation, victim services, victim support circles, you know, resolution, victim offender mediation, related community services, reparative boards, victim awareness programs, family-centered social work, offender family services, peace circles, family group conferencing, and community conferencing are three of the key components that bring together reparation, reconciliation, and responsibility to the community. So please, if you can pair up now and take a look at your home, your school, your program, your community. Do you see restorative practices being built in? And if not, what is one thing you can do to introduce restorative practices into your space? Okay, so once again, does your home, your school, your program have restorative practices built in where people can see one another, hear one another, understand, forgive, connect, and reestablish trust, and recommit to one another? If not, what is one thing you can do to introduce restorative practices into your space? Take a few minutes.
Hey, everybody home?
Maya says she can't hear them. Oh. You're good, Maya. We are just waiting for maybe 30 more seconds as they discuss.
Their conversation. You can hear me? You can hear me a couple times? Thank you. That was very exciting to hear so much chatter about restorative practices. Can we have a couple people share what was something that you heard that was exciting, that made you think differently about this work, or made you think, I'm going to try that, whether it's in the home or in a program or in a classroom or school? Just a couple people sharing, please. All right, thank you.
So the struggle we were having with like the concept of restorative practice in like a real situation, like let's say your sister gets raped. How does the justice kind of come out of that system from the restorative practices? And so we were talking about the deadline. Person who's a victim is a person who has to kind of make that. You could like to say you're forgiven. They're the person who has to take and keep taking on the pain in a sense, and keep taking the responsibility in a sense. So we got really deep. There was like, in reality, restorative practices means two people have to be willing to work together. That means the victim has to be willing to forgive, so the other person can be restored.
Very nice observation. So yes, both the victim and the aggressor, or the person that caused the harm, have to be willing. Now, there's always this big question, and Maya, I'd be curious on your opinion on this, but there's always this question about, is forgiveness required? And I think that's a big question, right? And I would argue that it's not, for that person to be restored. But being able to be heard, and to have the person that was the aggressor understand the pain that he or she caused, is a really important process for people to engage with. And we just don't, I appreciate what the video said about, it's a passive response, right? Prison and banishment is a passive response. But how do we do sorry? And that's more what it's about, is making sure that we teach young people how to do sorry in a way that they can be restored, because that's where it really comes from. For the victim, what's nice is when you, oftentimes in restorative practices, it's not just the two people, it is, especially in a school setting, it's the school community. It's everyone that's impacted by that conflict that's happened between two students or between a group of students. It impacts everybody. And so when people start to understand, and kids start to understand the impacts that their actions are having on the fuller community, you know, it helps them reflect a little bit more, number one. It helps them know that they have a full community of people that are willing to sit with them, hold them accountable, and help them stay in that space. You know, I think when in a situation where there's rape, that's a different level that would require a different process, for sure. And so thinking about in the environments that you're in, what are those right processes that you want to put into place? And I also recognize that this takes resources and it takes staffing and it takes training. But I would argue, Maya, and I'll turn it back over to you. I think it's one of the most important tools that we provide in Seeds of Peace is how do you set those systems up well? You know, the worst thing we can do for kids that are struggling is kick them out of school. When we think about where then, what then? Right, so, Maya, anything else to add?
Thank you. That was really beautifully articulated, Carrie. Yeah, I wanted to just add that remember that although the systems for setting up restorative practices have to be well facilitated, and you know, the training would be necessary. If you can find someone in your school or community that is able to do that, receive the training or can train you. It really is about shifting culture, as Carrie points out. It's not just about that particular conflict or moment of conflict. It's about changing the way that we see young people and one another and our capacity to make a difference and to build bridges. A lot of restorative justice is about acknowledging, as Carrie said, seeing people, but that means also seeing their gifts. When I did peer mediation programs in New York City, it was often the kids who were struggling with you know, gangs and sort of the class clown who would be disruptive. They were the best peer mediators because they were longing for attention. They were often dynamic, charismatic, you know, wanting to be leaders in some way, and they had not found positive application for their gifts, right? And their gifts were many. And so it was about helping them to see themselves differently and anew. And the options and possibilities for restorative practices enable a wider set of solutions as well. You know, if we're just looking at victim and offender, we have a lot of emotional spikiness, right? But when we start wrapping the community around them, they can feel supported, they can feel buoyed, but also they can share solutions that can enable victim and offender, but also the wider family to feel that sense of renewed responsibility towards each person in the family, right? So it's really about that cultural shift and having a strength-based approach.
It does take infrastructure, but it doesn't have to, you don't have to start big. And you can also think about how we integrate restorative practices. And I'll give you an example. My middle daughter is a senior in high school right now and just finished her college essays. And she wrote about a second grade situation where she has, in her school, they had what were called reentry forms. So when something happened and there was a problem, the child had to sit down and fill out this reentry form, have some reflection of what happened. They had to say what happened, what was their role, who did they hurt, and how did they hurt that person, and what they need to do to fix the situation, essentially. I'm sure there was better language. That reentry, so it gets addressed at school, and then it gets sent home. And then it usually gets sent home with a note that says, this is just FYI, no need to address it home, it's been addressed at school. And so I got one from my daughter, Hanale, and it says, I called Thomas a rotten sausage, ROTINSOSAG. And she started to cry when we were talking about it. I said, we don't have to talk about it. Your teacher said this happened at school. And she said, well, I want to tell you why. And so she told me that she had called him a rotten sausage because he had punched another boy in the stomach. So she was standing up for him, but it gave us an opportunity to talk about how do you be a better upstander than name calling? And what happens when we name call? And is that helpful? Is that not helpful? And when I understood the process that they used at school about this, it was extraordinary because they got to the root of what was happening. The whole class talked about it. And then they created commitments among each other about what they would do and why we don't name call. What are other ways that you can be an upstander? So there's a lot of opportunities in the day-to-day that you can use these restorative practices. And they last a lifetime. She wrote a college essay about it. So I wanted to share that. So we're going to be moving on. We went through critical thinking, where you got to hear about how we model, right, and how important modeling is. We also talked about critical thinking and how we set up a classroom for our students and our kids at home. How do we set up a space for them to talk about difficult issues? How do we facilitate that? We also talked about conflict resolution and restorative practices. And now we're going to move into the final tool, which is collaboration. And how do we collaborate with each other? And how do we collaborate with young people? So we'll show a short video.
You Talk Back has really empowered me and made me think that I can spur change. Just being around all these different students who share my beliefs and share my passion for their communities. It's nice and empowering to think that I'm not the only one who thinks about my future in this community and my role in this community. And so I think it's made me more active. Being with You Talk Back, it's really given me skills, not only to talk to people, but and to talk in front of people, but just to operate as a community member. It's nice to know that I'm not the only one who thinks about my future and thinks about their community. It makes me think about like other things going on in the world. It makes me more aware. And even though I'm doing a specific project with my group, I think that learning things from other groups just like broadens my knowledge, I guess. Even with this program, it kind of brings my voice more up, I think, makes my voice heard. And with other voices too, so as a collective group, we'll be noticed.
What YTV has taught me is that it's okay for one to like, I guess, reach out to people. Because I guess for me, even though I'm like used to talking to people, interacting with people, it's harder to, I guess, ask for that help and be okay with asking for it. And to know that there are people here to support you, and that no matter what you do, you can do it well, and that it's okay to make a mistake. You could just keep going forward, and yeah, that's what I learned from being a part of this wonderful program. Youth Talk Back has changed my Rome community by, I guess it gave me a sense of that I can make a difference, even though it may be small. It also gave me enough courage to talk with peers and connect more with people around me. I've learned a lot of skills to be able to express my emotions more and what I'm passionate about, and also my ideas. So without them, I probably wouldn't be able to do that.
I feel more empowered to do things. Like I think I'm more self-motivated to work against issues that I want to see stop.
because of you talk back, I feel like I'm less of just one small person community and more like a person who can actually do to make change in my community and make a difference with my friends, my peers, my school. Youth Talk Back has given me motivation and a reason to actually make change and to take action against things that I feel strongly about.
I think it's the first time I've seen her Youth Talk Back video. So one of the programs of Seeds of Peace is Youth Talk Back, and it's to make sure that we are centering youth voice, youth collaboration, and youth innovation. Right? When we talk in Seeds about envisioning a harvest, right? It's knowing where are we going? What is the change that we want to see in our families, the changes we want to see in our communities and in our schools. And if we don't have that vision, and if our young people don't have that vision, it's hard for them to know how to navigate, right, and where to go. And so we want them to see a future that matters to them, that they see themselves in, that they feel empowered in, and then be able to figure out how can I start to impact that now, right? We always talk about our young people are the ones that will design the future, but are we providing the time and space for them to do that very thing and to do the designing? And so I just encourage you all to, when you're thinking about how you're working with young people, how do you support innovation and entrepreneurship in solving the problems that they want to see solved? I don't know that there's a single young person on this planet that doesn't want peaceful and just communities. There's adults that don't want it. I don't know that there's a single young person that doesn't. So how do we help them get there? Okay, Maya, over to you to introduce
Chelsea. Yes, Chelsea is another one of my pumpkins. I was her teacher in the 8th and 10th and 11th grade a couple decades ago, but she is a Seeds of Peace action planner and community member and participant, and she's a teacher at Manoa Elementary, and would like to share kind of how she took the Seeds of Peace action of creating initially a book featuring her students' drawings and images of peace. And kind of scaffolded that opportunity, took it to the next level. We mentioned her, I think, last workshop, but take a look at her story. She's inspiring.
So in the beginning of the year, I thought that this was such a powerful thing to have as our caption, so we kind of adopted the pineapple as our caption mascot. So in the beginning of the year, coming as a journalist and asked them to explore what they think the secret symbolism of the pineapple might be. And so through vocabulary, we learn about the word hospitality. What does that mean when you're a hospitable person? They explored and came up with that it means when you treat people like your guests and everyone is welcome. So this space is our pineapple costume, and it means that everyone is welcome to and belong. And so through this project, we incorporate reading, and one of our first reading learning goals is character traits. We explore different character traits from different books, and then we come up with adjectives of all these things that we can describe to for people, and they give each other a trait. And so at the end of the year, they're not so much calling each other by their names, but more, oh, I know I can go to so-and-so because they're the hospitable, peaceful person, or I want to go to so-and-so because I need to be cared for, and that's my caring friend. And So through that project, that opens the door, and we do an interview process and an art project that goes with it. Even just taking the time to shake each other's hands and reflect, empathize. So I'm starting my third year with this, to really take time. And whatever that introduces is kind of what starts the theme for the year. So whatever their goal is, how they want to spread peace is what we kind of capture. So the first year was a book. The second year, they created a movie and it was played in the cafeteria for like school rules and how we're gonna spread peace. This year they want to do a peace parade. So we'll see how that goes. We started with a mural that was a grant, and we just did a project where the students wanted to share a holiday wishing gift with unfortunate children. The kids designed a book, and they all took ownership of a skill that they wanted to teach of how to spread peace. So whatever their idea was, they had to embrace it and teach the whole class. So every day there would be a peace leader, and they would teach the class, and the challenge was that everyone would do that act of peace. And at the end of the year, it became such a powerful project, and the kids are so excited that after their book, they wanted to create a little kit to get other classes started into exploring the different acts of peace. So each kid brought in reusable jars and whatever they had at home, and they put together these kits of a 5-day challenge. So the students said that peace is love, so there was a hug challenge where the teacher has a hugging clip, and the student has to teach how to give an appropriate hug, and then at the end of the day, everyone stands who was given an appropriate hug or handshake, and it shows how it's contagious. Peace is community, so as a class, we put some seeds in there, so the classroom had to go outside and all together plant a seed, or with that plant a dream. Peace is friendship, so on Fridays, there was a pack of Post-its in the peace kit. On Fridays, every student would choose a name out of a hat and give a compliment and leave it on their desk secretly. Peace is new friendship, so the students handmade friendship bracelets and leave enough in the kit for the class, so that each classroom had to go to a different grade level and make a new friend and actually hand tie it to symbolize that new friendship. And so through these peace kits, they actually wrote a how to write peace, like one of our standards, how to use the peace kit. And each day, the last month of school, after we introduced the peace kit, each of our kids adopted a class and went and read their how to use the peace kit and gave the gift. And the last month of school, they went on the intercom, and it was a challenge each day. They each read their page of the book, but then on the last week of school, the 5 days of the kit, the whole school was doing the act of peace. So it was such a way to end the school year, and for these first graders to influence the other grades was really amazing. This young age, incorporating social emotional learning into our everyday routine is the most powerful practice, because not only do they come to school to learn, but they come to school to really work together and to thrive. And now you can see we're learning these 21st century learning skills. It's all about collaborating and working together and listening to each other and building off of each other's ideas. So I realized that when kids have a connection to their classroom, to their teacher, to their space, they're so much more dedicated that the learning just comes naturally because they want to be here. It's not so much of a challenge. And in the beginning of the year, the challenges that we had turned into the strength, for kids were helping each other without being asked to, offering this, collaborating, doing the belly breathe, telling me, oh, now's a good time to do the belly breathe, Mrs. Sullivan. We have a lot going on, and just when they start to teach me and teach their parents, and it becomes this routine, that's when you're just, wow. And when they take time, you see them in the corner talking out something that maybe hurt their feelings, but instead of coming to me, they have these skills to speak their mind, to empathize, to listen. That's truly rewarding.
So these kids, they will naturally
Yeah,
have,
round of applause for Chelsea. She's really extraordinary, and I think she has demonstrated it's how we integrate these skills and these tools in every day, in every class. And again, we are, we are more than willing to offer technical assistance and support. Your facilitators will as well, about how you do that in math class, how you do it in photography class. Alden and I were talking about that. But peace building skill sets and conflict resolution skill sets should and can be built into every single classroom, and in every single type of curriculum. So with that, we're going to close out with KIT President. I see my friend Marty in the back, who just got to see this video a couple weeks ago at a work event. But KIT President will close us out before we move into community voices.
I think we all need to talk. The world needs to stop being boring. Yeah, boring is easy. Everybody. Life is not game, people. Life isn't a cereal either. And if life is a game, aren't we on the same team? I mean, really, right? We're on the team. This is nice, people. Got air come through your nose. The heartbeat. That means it's time to do something. Uh-oh. Two roads diverged in the woods, and I took the road less traveled. Oh, what? I'm across what the world were to me. I won't be the one that beats awesome. But that dude turned and said, don't stop believing. Unless you get then you should be better. Don't keep playing. Look at the word that quit. But we retired. Yeah, we retired. But before that, high school. Wolfie quit when he didn't make the team. You will never make Space Jam. Oh, be your Space Jam. What will you create when you make the world awesome? Nothing if you keep sitting there. That's why I'm talking to you today. This is your time. This is my time. It's our time. We can make every day better for each other. We're all on the same team. Let's start acting. We got work to do. How about dance You were made. This is awesome. Let's get out there. I don't know. I'm just a kid. I do know this. Everybody do forget the world and its two things. Get to it.
So on behalf of Maya and Scott and our Seeds of Peace team, I just want to thank you all for creating the action plans to help make this world awesome. And thank you for being on our Seeds of Peace team. And with that, I'll turn over to Scott.
Thanks, Carrie. Can we give Maya and Carrie a round of applause? We are going to be moving into our guest speaker portion, but before we do that, let's give you folks a quick break. It is 10:22. Can we have you folks back by 10:27? How long, 10:28. I don't know. 10:30-ish. Fine. Okay, we'll see you folks back at 10:30. Thank you.